Welcome to Know Your Money, where we will explore our relationship with money and how the psychology of it impacts our financial decisions, as everyone thinks about money differently. In our podcast, we'll be presenting a variety of financial topics in an easy-to-understand way, which we hope will assist you with managing your money. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Know Your Money. Warren, Craig, how are you today?
Very well, Bronwyn. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good to see you, Bronwyn. Good to see you, Warren.
You too, Craig.
Never a chore.
Never, yeah, always a pleasure, never a chore. Yeah.
Okay, so one of our audience members had a question, and that audience member is you.
It's me.
Yes.
No. Okay, guys, as you know, recently bought a house, and I have a plan to pay it off as soon as I can. So the remaining bond. What I'm wondering is that wise? Because the money I'll be putting into the bond will not be going into any money markets or investments or anything. So I'll be putting all of my excess cash into the bond to pay it off. Is that better?
What type of bond is it, first off?
I don't know.
Is it an access bond? You did an episode on these different things.
No, I know, but it's in my wife's name. She's the one in charge, as we all know. Yeah. So no, I don't know if it's an access bond, but the point being is, shall I pay it off, or shall I continue to make the monthly payments and then put the money I was going to pay it off with into investments?
I think the good question there, Bron, the access bond or not. So Warren, if it's not an access bond, that means whatever you put in there, you can't access, you can't draw it out. A lot of the newer bonds, and I say newer bonds, it hasn't been around for that long, but let's say you had R1 million bond and you paid it up to paying it off, almost nearly paying it off, and you got 200,000 left, but you could access another 600,000. So there was a facility that you could draw out.
Yeah.
So that's dangerous, because generally 99% of the population would have access to that money and probably at some stage draw it out.
So I'm not familiar with that, because having come back from the UK, mortgages there's no such product.
Okay. So
you owe us this much and you can pay it off, or you can pay the monthly.
So that's good. If there's no access to it, then that means you can't ever dip into it. You pay.
Yeah.
Because the access is a problem. We find that throughout our client base. They say we're going to take all our investments, we're going to put into the bond, have no bond, no debt. We say, okay, that's a great plan, but then make sure that you cancel that bond and get the title deed that you can't access it.
Okay.
But most people say, no, I think I should keep it open just that rainy day.
Yeah.
That rainy
And the thing
day
that I find with the mindset about the access bond is, like, they see that money as theirs, but then if the bond is paid up, they had R1 million saved, in inverted commas, but then when the bond's paid up, they have zero because they were doing no savings on the side.
Yeah, but that's my thing, right, is that I would like to concentrate on, because what I looked at is, so we would end up paying over 30 years 3 times what we borrowed back. Now, that to me is stupid. If you have the ability to pay it off in a short period of time, just get it paid off.
Yeah.
And then the money you would have been paying the bank for the next 30 years, put that into savings. That's my mindset here.
So that's a great mindset, but it's also a very, very big discipline. Like, so you say...
You know me well.
I know, but often people pay off a bond. Like, before you had a bond, you guys were living how you were living. Now you have a bond and you're paying that bond amounts. Does that make sense? Like, it just kind of fits it in.
Yeah, I think it's so what our rent and our bond are the same amount. So what we were paying in rent, we are now paying in a bond.
Okay. So, but some people are not disciplined. We've had this conversation before.
Yeah.
That when that stops, that money doesn't go anywhere. So as long as you have the discipline that money goes somewhere, there's definitely a part into the bond thing. But there's a few questions I think we need to know before saying.
So the access is, so let's assume you don't have access, right? Which is great. So they're not going to go and dip into it. I think you should take some of the money.
What's your interest rate?
I think it's 10.5,
okay,
10.7,
so
something like that.
So you're going to get that. So versus a money market, the money markets are actually doing quite well at the moment. They're about 9%, but you're still going to get 2% more in your bond. So it's better, instead of saying, let me save in a money market, it's better to save in your bond, no doubt about that.
Yeah, so you mean paying it off?
Yes, correct,
Yeah.
paying it off. But if you go to another investment, let's say a retirement annuity, because we did one of these episodes
Yes.
recently, we can say, but then the retirement annuity will always beat the bond because you're going to get the deduction back for the contributions, plus the growth in the retirement annuity is tax-free as well. That's over a period of time. So I would say, if you can, split it. Because it'll be good to still build your retirement savings up.
Right.
Because you're going to get the compound effect over time. And then, yes, you are going to pay your bond off earlier. Another thing, and I heard this years and years ago, but if you increase your bond by 10% a year, now the banks don't have that facility.
You have to ask them.
You have to ask them.
Yeah.
But the investment houses do have that facility. You can put an inflation fighter onto your monthly premium for your tax-free or for your endowment. You can say, right, increase it every year by 5%, 10%, or some of them even 20%. But you can automatically every year it'll go up. The banks don't ask you for that with a bond.
Of course
because
they
want to
don't.
keep you.
Yeah, the longer you
Yes.
pay it, the more they get. Yeah.
But I think the sums worked out that if you increased your bond by 10%, you'd pay your bond off within 8 years.
Right.
So a 20-year bond would go almost better than half the time by just increasing the bond payments every year. But that's a difficult decision to do, to go to the bank and say, right, put my repayments up by 10% because I've got a salary increase or etc. So it's all around.
But I mean, I suppose with the banks then, right, you'd have to, just like when they are vetting you for the amount they're willing to lend you, you have to then prove to them you could afford the higher payments, right?
I don't think so. I think once the bond's approved,
You just have to pay what your minimum amount is. So if it's 5,000 Rand a month and you want to make it now 8,000, that's completely up to you. But if you want to go back to the 5, which is what you agreed on, then that's it. But
so would you set that up, Craig, could you set it up as an automatic debit order increase? So do you have to contact the bank then? Or would you just set it up and say, well, instead of paying 5,000, I'm going to pay 8,000 a month?
You'll have to tell them and you have to set it up, but it won't automatically happen every year.
Right.
So if you want
every year you'd have to then. I see what you're saying.
And there's a discipline problem.
So, but if we go back to that then, so if I was to be absolute then, right? So let's try and do some maths here, right? So let's say there's 1 million owed on the bond, and I want to pay that off in 3 years, okay? Versus the 30 years of paying it back. What would I gain by then taking that similar income per annum, disposable income, let's call it? So let's say there's 300K a year that's disposable that I could put into savings. Would it not be more beneficial for me to just get the bond paid off rather than doing a bit on the retirement annuity, a bit on the bond? But is it better to have a blend, or is it?
So a concept that we did at the end of last year was those 7 relationships.
Yes.
And that there's definitely 7 kind of versions of you and 7 areas of you that you have to look at and be mindful of in any journey. And for me, it's, yes, you don't want to be in debt, and most people don't. But if you pay everything off in debt, then all those other areas can be at risk.
Yeah.
So to me, it's not just about into the retirement annuity. It's if you have that 300,000 Rand, okay, how much is going to debt? How much is going to keeping for emergencies? You have a new baby. What happens there?
Yeah.
How much is going into savings for other future goals that you want so that can grow a little bit better? And then how much is also going into retirement? So it's, yes, you always want to do the smartest thing by paying off the interest, but sometimes there's just got to be that blend and balancing act of everything. So to me, whatever you get, break it up into those different areas. So if it's 4 areas that you break it up, or if it's 3 areas, so 100,000 into the bond, 100,000 into keeping and saving, and 100,000 into growing.
Yeah.
You're looking after all versions of Warren and not just one.
Okay.
And you could focus on the bond. You know, once those emergency funds built up and the other areas are built up and you've got your retirement annuity running at a good level, you can, any extra money, you can make sure it goes in the bond because you know that.
You don't start there.
You don't start there,
So, Warren, don't be all or nothing with the bond.
No, correct.
Yeah.
Be all or nothing with all of you.
With-
Yeah.
All versions of you. you know.
Yeah. See, that sounds sensible. It's just, I guess, I think this goes back to what we've talked about before with my upbringing and my father's father, my grandfather, and how debt is, I feel very uneasy with it.
Oh, that's great. And it's really good to clear the debt. But as Bron said, the other areas you need to fill up as well, not just this one. Another thing about property, it depends. You can have a situation where you want to sell it, but you put extra money into it, but the value of the property is dropped and you can't get your money out. You know what I mean? You won't get
so
what
for
you
example,
put in.
you guys need to move to England all of a sudden, and now you've put all of your money into paying off the bond, and
no
you have to
access.
sell the house for cheaper because the market's gone.
Yeah.
You've put that all in and it's gone, and you have none of those other safety nets. You have none of those goals and savings and retirements. And it's not to say that all of it must also go into retirement, because that money is locked up in for there. So it really is about, like, my thing is always, how much is that lump sum and what are the different areas it needs to go into to look after, not just one.
And even the debit orders, the same thing. They allocate the debit orders to different parts of what you need to put away.
Yeah.
And maybe, and you will put more into the bond. And you know, by putting more into the bond, you're going to trim off years and years and years. And trimming the years off is going to trim off hundreds of thousands of rand in the long term.
Yeah, like if you have 1,000 rand extra, you want to put 500 into the bond, fine. But then those other ones put the other areas kind of thing.
And I think it's excellent that you're focusing on getting rid of debt. That's a fantastic...
Yeah, I don't know. In my mind, it's like, well, if I have no debt, well, then I can truly grow things, because how can I consider growing wealth if I'm still owing money?
Yeah.
It's just the way I think.
No, it's true. No, it's really true.
If I still owe the bank this amount, well, then I'm not really growing my future, am I?
Yeah.
I'm just partly doing it. But I get what you're saying.
I think a lot of people think like that, you know, like, I can't start saving until I have no debt.
Yeah, that's kind of it, yeah.
And the thing is, you're not always going to be out of debt. And sometimes debt is a good thing. Sometimes debt helps you from a tax perspective. Like if you have a second property and you're paying off a bond and that person's renting that property, the money that they're paying to rent that is paying off the bond. Whereas if you had paid that second property off and you get that rental income gets added on to your income.
Yes,
and then you pay tax on that.
Yeah.
So it really is such a balancing act, but about all the different things, I think.
Yeah, and
Did we
I think it's important for all our listeners to make sure that you engage with your financial planner and sit and go through the different numbers and then do. But we still firmly believe that you must spread it across the different pillars of your
The seven.
Seven.
Yes, the seven, don't
Bronwyn.
forget.
Correct.
Seven. And that's the thing. So, like, come to us with that amount and say, okay, this year it was this. What do you think? You know, so like a lot of planning that I do with clients now is when their bonus comes in. Their bonus was always to pay their credit cards off for the year before.
Yeah.
So now we're trying to say, okay, well, what expenses came up within the year that we can put away for those keeping areas and then do other things for saving. So whenever these lump sums come in, your money back from SARS, we automatically spend it on anything, paying off debts but you got to spend it in all the areas to really live this fulfilled life, I believe.
Okay. Thank
Thanks.
you very much, guys.
Cool.
Great
Have a good
question,
one.
though, Warren.
Yeah.
Really good question.
You're welcome, Craig.
Thanks,
For you.
Brian.
Sorry we didn't give you the answer you wanted.
No, you didn't reassure me that I was right. You actually told me that there is a better way. And I agree.
Partially.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this podcast, would like to subscribe, please visit our website, www.growthfp.co.za. The information we have provided in this podcast is our personal opinion. For more detailed information, please discuss your financial situation with a financial planner.